an intricate line reasoning. Schopenhauer's objective in becoming interested in Indian philosophy is a topic that has generated several debates and interpretations among scholars. There is no single definitive answer, but we can consider some possibilities. First of all, we must consider the existence of the flow of ideas, and the source of something underlying, such as the idea of an intellectual form, which is demonstrated to the intellectual. One hypothesis is that Schopenhauer sought to find in Indian philosophy a kind of validation for his own ideas. By establishing parallels between his conception and Sanskrit text, he could give great credibility and legitimacy to his philosophy. Another possibility is that Schopenhauer found in Indian philosophy a source of inspiration and depth for his own reflections. Indian concepts about the nature of reality, suffering and the liberation could have enriched his own understanding of existence. Schopenhauer could simply have been driven by pure intellectual curiosity. The discovery of such a rich philosophy could have sparked his interest in exploring new perspective and ideas. It is possible that Schopenhauer was searching for universal philosophy that would be able to.
The influence of the Upanishads on Schopenhauer's philosophy has a deep connection with Indian thought. Especially the Upanishads, this influence is evident in the way he approaches issues such as the nature of reality, suffering, liberation and will. One of the most striking concepts is the use of the concepts and term vel of Maya in Indian philosophy. Maya represents the cosmic illusion that obscures the ultimate reality, Brahman. Schopenhauer adopts this concept to describe the phenomenal world, which he considers a mere representatio, an illusion created by our mind. Another important connection between Schopenhauer and the Upanishads is the notion of an ultimate reality that transcends the phenomenal world. For Schopenhauer, this reality is the will, a blind force that drives the entire universe. In the Upanishads, this ultimate reality is Brahman, the absolute reality that is unique. Both Schopenhauer and the Upanishads emphasize suffering as an inherent characteristic of existence. Life is marked by dissatisfaction and the incessant search for pleasure, which is never lasting. Liberation from suffering, both in the Upanishads and in Schopenhauer, involves understanding the illusory nature of the world. Differs in some aspect. For Schopenhauer, liberation occurs through the denial of will. The way to achieve liberation, however, differs in some aspects. For Schopenhauer, liberation occurs through the denial of will, that renouncing desires and the search for pleasure. In the Upanishads, liberation is achieved through the realization of the Atman, that is, the individual consciousness that identifies with Brahman.
Schopenhauer was encanted by Indian wisdom, mainly because it brought to light teaching that corresponded to his own philosophy. Although he conceived the Vedas as the fruit of the greatest human knowledge and wisdom and the Upanishads as the most valuable gift of the century, only his philosophy was able to elucidate, in his view, the great Vedic teaching expressed by the Sanskrit formula Tattvam Asya. For the Indian people, this knowledge would have been transformed into a myth, as they would not have the conditions to assimilate this thought in a pure and self-contained manner. The logical clarity and the meaning of such knowledge, that is, the metaphysical identity of all beings, its process of acquisition or intuition and its ethical implications, that is, compassion and acuity. The legitimacy of this clarification is, however, questioned by contemporary Hindu scholars, especially Paul Hacker in Schopenhauer and Hindu Ethics. Hacker strives to demonstrate the hermeneutical weakness of the Schopenhauerian interpretation and the consequences of this mistaken interpretation on Hindu morality and on contemporary Hinduism, especially what he calls Neo-Hinduism. Schopenhauer's ethical doctrine would have influenced the Indian spiritual leader Vivekananda, one of the great responsible
Neo-Hinduism, a term coined by German ideologist Paul Hacker to describe a religious phenomenon that emerged from the encounter between traditional Hinduism and Western thought. Hacker argues that form Hinduism is not a continuation of the authentic tradition, but rather a cultural synthesis, influenced by Western ideas and values. In his work Aspects of Neo-Hinduism is concentrated with subverting traditional Hinduism, Hacker establishes a distinction between Neo-Hinduism and subverting traditional Hinduism. For him, Neo-Hinduism is a hybrid creation and the result of the interaction between Hinduism and the West, incorporating elements of both, and therefore is not a continuation of the tradition. Neo-Hinduism distanced itself from its deepest roots in traditional Hinduism, including influences from Western philosophers, including German idealism, which exerted a great influence on its neo-Hinduist composition, much criticized for its work. His critics argue that Hacker adopts a Eurocentric perspective, valuing the Hindu tradition as it fits into his own worsened standards. The distinction between traditional Neo-Hinduism is seen by some as an oversimplification of the complexity of Hindu tradition. By denying the capacity for change, by emphasizing the break with the past, Hacker seemed to underestimate the capacity of religious traditions to adapt and transform over time. Paul Hacker identifies a period of transmission, beginning around 1870, in which figures such as Backim Chandra, Swami Vivikenanda, Aurobindo Gohs, Mahatma Ghandi, RhadaKrishnan emerge. These figures and personalities represent a new Hinduism, marked by interaction with the West. Let us now return to Schopenhauer, and for this we will also consider Hacker and Hinduism. The comparison between these three schools of thought reveals points of convergence and divergence regarding Hindu philosophy and its interaction with Western philosophy. Points of convergence, pessimism and ciphering. Both Schopenhauer and many traditional Hindu thinkers emphasize the in Buddhism and the concept of samsara in Hinduism echo Schopenhauer's pessimism about the will to live. Generalizing then, so as to avoid confusion, Schopenhauer and Hindu philosophy seek a way out of human suffering. Schopenhauer is only philosopher and not divine revealer or a builder of religion, but both Hindu mysticism and Schopenhauer seek a way out of human suffering. Schopenhauer prophesies the denial of the will to live as a path to liberation, while traditional Hinduism offers several paths, such as yoga and bhakti, to achieve liberation, moksha. Both Schopenhauer and many Hindu thinkers value intuition and direct experience over pure reason as the means to reach truth. Some points of divergences. Schopenhauer centers his philosophy on the will as the driving force of the universe and the cause of all suffering. In Hinduism, the will is important, but it is only one of many aspects of reality. Schopenhauer was an atheist, although he found affinities with some Hindu ideas. Traditional Hindu thinkers, on the other hand, believe in a deity or divine principle. Both adopt systematic philosophical approach. Hinduism uses dialectics, symbolism, mythology, and logic. Turning now to Paul Hacker. Hacker is more philosophical and analytical. Schopenhauer, with his emphases on individual experience and intuition, presents a more mystical aspect. Hacker, on the other hand, as an academic, seeks a more rigorous and systematic analysis of Hinduism.
Empirical intuition as immediate and knowledge. This part of the video focuses on Schopenhauer's criticism of Kant's view of empirical intuition. His arguments is that Kant reduced it to more receptivity. When I personality have an intuition, I am being receptive to a pre-existing model of from. Lefts continue. Schopenhauer argues that Kant reduced it to mere passive receptivity of sensory data. Schopenhauer, empirical intuition is an active process of understanding, which transforms raw sensations into meaningful representation. These transformations occur through the a priori forms or space-time, which are innate to our understanding and shape the way we perceive the world. A priori forms are like lenses that organize sensations, allowing us to have a coherent experience of the world. It is crucial to distinguish between sensation is the data of experience, the immediate impression yacht objects cause on our senses. Sensation is chaotic and disorganized. It does not provide us with clear and distinct knowledge of the objects. Representation is the product of empirical intuition, the mental image that we construct from sensations. Representation is organized and meaningful. It allows us to have knowledge of objects. Empirical intuition is the basics of our knowledge of the world. It is through it that we have access to objects, their properties and their relationship. However, empirical intuition does not provide us with knowledge of reality in itself. For Schopenhauer is the will, a build and irrational force that manifests itself in the phenomenal world. The will is the thing in itself, the essence of reality that lies behind the veil of Maya. Empirical intuition allows us to know the manifestations of the will, but not the will itself.
The search for tranquility. Schopenhauer describes an everyday world marked by violence, the result of the incessant struggle of will. Faced with this reality, he seeks tranquility through aesthetic perception. Aesthetic perception is presented as a special mental state that allows one to grasp the essence of an object, going beyond its physical appearance. Schopenhauer draws inspiration from Platonic ideas to explain that through aesthetic perception it is possible to glimpse the archetype or ideal form objects. The individual forgets his or her individuality and connects with something more universal. The comparison with a portrait artist who seeks to idealize a face, removing imperfections, helps to understand how aesthetic perception seeks perfection and the essence of the objects. Schopenhauer argues that the quality of the aesthetic experience depends on the correspondence between the perceiving subject and the objects that is perceived. In other words, the ability to appreciate the beauty and essence of an object is related to the ability to de-individualize oneself and connect with the universal. For the philosopher, aesthetic perception is a way to transcend the violence and suffering of the everyday world. For Schopenhauer, the highest purpose of arts is to communicate Platonic ideas. Works of art, especially visual and literary arts. Schopenhauer argues that the fragmentation of the world into separate individuals is an illusion, the result of our lack of knowledge. This illusion leads us to act selfishly.
Schopenhauer, the highest purpose of art is to communicate Platonic ideas. Works of art, especially the visual and literary arts, are immediate objectifications of these ideals, revealing the essence of the reality in a clear and accessible way. Schopenhauer, like many medieval Christians, believed in the need to minimize carnal desires in order to achieve through an attitude that transcends bodily individuality, seeking something greater and universal. He recognizes that his views on morality are aligned Christian practice and with the ethical doctrines of the sacred books of Intuition. Their parallel between his moral conception, which resembles the theories Immanuel Kant and Mill, both of one also defend principles aligned with Christianity. However, Schopenhauer seeks to go beyond reason, emphasizing the importance of intuition and experience. He argues that all human beings are manifestations of a single will, the blind and irrational force that drives the universe. This fundamental unity leads us to share in the pain and suffering of others, for we are all part of the same essence. For Schopenhauer, it is implicit in the consciousness of humanity to understand that we carry within ourselves the sins and joys of all. This vision leads us to act with compassion and to seek to reduce suffering in the world. Schopenhauer argues that the fragmentation of the world into separate individuals is illusion resulting from lack of knowledge. This illusion leads us to act selfishly.